Good morning, comrade. WHIVLP New Orleans 102.3. This is your weekly Good Morning Comrade. Last Good Morning Comrade of 2025. And we're going to do, I guess, a little bit of a year in review. Robert's actually on vacation, so it's just going to be me. And I guess we're just going to sort of like weave our way through a lot of the stuff that happened in the year that was 2025. We're going to talk a little bit about what we could potentially see in 2026. Obviously, we're not going to be able to get to everything that happened this year because it was just so much. I mean, this has been a crazy year just generally, just to kind of bring us in. I mean, it was a year of, I mean, obviously the right wing, the far right wing of America took over. We've seen, and we're going to get to this a little bit more in depth in a bit. Um, e- Essentially, an invasion into cities in this country to essentially take over, and the pretense for that is that essentially an attack on immigrants. We have seen essentially a fake ceasefire take place in Gaza and what seems to be essentially a handing over of what remains there to a what is essentially going to be a part of the Israeli government. We're going to talk about that as well, or I mean, we'll get into that in particular, into the details with this Gaza Peace Council that is proposed. AI and data farms have been popping up all over the place. These data centers, which threaten to take, I mean, not just raise the cost of energy, threaten and test out our energy grid and require the production of more and more energy. But also, I mean, again, this is an attack on climate, and I also want to make sure that, like, when I talk about this, like AI is essentially just a justification for what they're going to do. I mean, before it was bitcoins, and now then it was NFTs, and then it was now it's AI. Whatever like comes up as a sort of specific thing that wants to be essentially that they want to sort of like use as the marketing for like just creating this incredible amount of capacity of I mean, they're essentially construction projects, and that's sort of why a lot of, especially the building trades, unions have gotten involved and have sort of co-signed on a lot of this stuff, for better or for worse. We're just going down this road, and we're just kind of in that way. Obviously, we had the murder of Charlie Kirk and all of the, I mean, truly insane stuff that spilled out of that. From, I mean, it created a right wing civil war, which has been a lot to see. And I mean, it's not all bad, obviously. We have had the rise in New York City of Zohran Mamdani, somebody who, is a pretty committed democratic socialist in New York City. And he won his election to become the next mayor against establishment ghouls to have essentially an attempt to put together a pilot program for what a suite of socialists or socialist adjacent policies could be in a really big in a really big sort of like under the microscope situation in New York City. So I mean, there is a lot that happened this year, and a lot of it is going to spill into 2026. And I mean, we've just scratched the surface. I mean, there's just so much to think about in terms of like what we've come through. I mean, it's wild. I mean, the United States bombed Iran this year. I mean, it has been a year of complete and utter seeming chaos, I guess you could say. On a personal front, I started 2025 without a job. Now I do have a job, which has sort of had a bit of an impact on this show because I've been, you might have noticed our recording schedule might have gotten a little bit more radical. Or if you haven't noticed, that means we've been doing our job correctly. We've been doing a good job of sort of getting our shows in the can and keeping things moving. Just not to make this a production meeting, but it is a it had been a little bit of a trial here. I've been traveling a lot more. I've been moving around a lot physically, and been working long hours, long weeks, 10 days, in a row, minimum. So, you know, it, it's going to be 2026 is going to be a really exciting year when it comes to what it is we're going to see. But let's look at a couple of, I guess, highlights and like, oh, how could I forget too? And we're going to talk about this a little bit more in depth as well. Starbucks workers have been on strike for months with the Red Cup Rebellion, with all of their action. They've been on strike for since November, I believe, to get better treatment. A very long unfair labor practice strike, and we will talk about that as well. All up here on Good Morning Comrade. So, without further ado, let's get started. First thing I wanted to talk about was, not just the not just the invasion that I talked about at the beginning by essentially the feds, the federal government, by ICE and Department of Homeland Security, on American cities. That's bad enough, but there's also been record high numbers of detentions that have been um, people being held essentially because they are suspected of being here illegally. And I wanted to kind of go through this article that I'm reading from it's from the Guardian, actually. Uh, and it is here. Record number of people in ICE detention. Number of people in ICE detention is record high. Data shows ICE held more than 68,400. That is a large football stadium worth of people. That is in detention in this country. The number of people in immigration detention in the United States is at an all-time high, according to to the public data published by U.S. Immigration and Customs Enforcement, ICE. The data, which comes out every 2 weeks, shows that as of the 14th of December, 2025, ICE holds more than 68,400 people. This many people in immigration detention is a new record, breaking the previous high set in the beginning of December. So essentially, every 2 months, they're just rounding up, every 2 weeks, rather, they're just rounding up more and more people. And the only period, I guess, if you look at this graph where they don't have information for the number of people that they've round up or they've been holding at attention is the period during the government shutdown, which was the end of September and the beginning of October, or through most of October, over 40 days. Longest government shutdown in United States history, by the way. The Guardian, using ICE's data, has continued to track the number of people arrested, detained, and deported by the agency. The latest, published on the 22nd of December, right before Christmas, covers the 1st of October through the 14th of December 2025. The Guardian has been tracking this data and has calculated the total number of people the administration has arrested, detained, and deported since January 2025. In total, the administration has arrested more than 328,000 people and deported nearly 327,000. Jesus. Again, that's almost a third of a million people that have been arrested and deported in this country. And it's really just to push forward this, never-ending narrative of, this this country has been overrun by immigrants or whatever. This really, I mean, and again, the word fascism is being bandied about quite a lot for a reason when it comes to whether or not it fits a technical term that you describe as fascism or whatever. Like the idea of just this level of um you know arresting, rounding up, deep in and detaining and deporting people is, I mean, people are calling it fascist for a reason. That's just what it is. I mean, whether or not it falls into the actual, technical definition or whatever of fascism, that's less important than what is actually going on here or what you're actually seeing. So I really do think that that's worth pointing out. Um, One of the biggest changes in immigration and enforcement policies, and I also wanted to say this too because like what a lot of the right wing and Donald Trump and a lot of his flunkies and cronies and ne'er do wells that deal around with him are saying is that the reason that we're in this situation is because the previous president, Joe Biden, did not do any kind of immigration policy, which is insane. The Democrats always do. They always carry out the right wing's policies when they get implemented. Even in previous administrations, and also there was a bill that the Democrats supported that was essentially a solidification of the first Donald Trump term, 2016. Remember that? A solidification of the first Donald Trump's term immigration policy, which was draconian, and the Democrats in the 2016 election, if you recall, would run around saying that this is this is an attack on immigrants. This is all these other things, and then essentially what they do is they come in and they justify it by signing off on it. And what do the Republicans do but say, well, that's not good enough, even though this is exactly the policies that they were pushing, not 4 years prior or less. So it's just another example that you constantly see of the never-ending ratchet to the right that we constantly see over and over again, and it gets us in this situation where we're actually at the precipice, or where we're again, whether or not you call it fascism, not as important as understanding what is happening right now. One of the biggest changes in immigration enforcement policies, immigrants with no criminal record continue to make up the largest group in U.S. immigration detention. So people with no criminal record, people who have done nothing wrong other than be here in this country without, a piece of paper that says it's supposed to be here. Despite the administration's rhetoric about focusing its anti-immigration efforts on the worst of the worst criminals, being undocumented in the United States is a civil, not a criminal infraction. The Trump administration has also moved to invalidate protections for many immigrations staying in the United States legally. So, this is a really good primer on what's going on. It's not just an attack on people who may not have immigration status, that people that are here without, I sound like a broken record. I'm saying this over and over again, but the the BS that keeps coming out over and over again, is that again they're coming at the worst of the worst. They're coming after criminals. That's why they're coming after cities, because they're dangerous because of all these illegal immigrants. No, they're actually getting people with no criminal record. In fact, that's the majority of the people that they're detaining. And for what is a civil offense? I mean, it's not a criminal infraction to be in the country. It is not a criminal infraction. It's a civil infraction. The Trump administration has also moved to invalidate protection from any immigration staying in the United States illegally. So it doesn't even matter if you are illegal, here with documentation. I hate saying that people are legal immigrants or whatever, because it's sort of it's a really bad rhetorical trap to fall into. But if they're even coming after people who have broken no laws, who have no criminal record, and who do have the proper documentation for being in this country, even by the rules we currently have, which are draconian. People in ICE detention by criminal history. If you look at this red line on the graph, sorry to the radio listeners, but there's a line graph on this article that essentially is it goes from a period where before 2025, when Trump took office, and even before Trump took office, actually, there was a beginning of a rise in detention, I guess, because immigration enforcement was emboldening, anticipating, these new draconian policies. But there are now, according to this graph's estimation, almost 24,000 people in detention right now. Almost 24,000 people in detention as of the 4th of December. So, 2 weeks ago, as of recording, with no criminal record. 16,000, so almost 17,000 people with a criminal record, and almost 16,000 with pending charges, which is just, again, it's people being detained not for criminal. Well, even people who do have criminal records, like, they should be held not by this, gulag, not by these brown shirts, not by these federal agents who are designed to just expel immigrants. They should be held in, they have prisons, they have jails, they have all of these things that are part of the existing structure that these people will constantly say have failed or whatever. But again, whether or not that falls into the literal definition of a gulag, it certainly falls into a similar structure of it, or a similar role. You listen to WHIVLP New Orleans 102.3. This is Good Morning Comrade. Jeff here on the show, having a real fun year in review episode. Kind of moving forward, I did want to talk about the data centers, and the rise of, again, the marketing label that is slapped in on this, at least for now, is AI. But if there is an AI crash, there's not going to be an end to these data center projects, which have been planned in advance and fully funded many years into the future. They're construction projects as much as they are AI sort of attempts at grifts. I think that's important to remember. There will be a new tech thing that will replace AI if AI becomes, not such a good marketing tool anymore. But this is an article from the Harvard Political Review about the energy impact and the climate impact of these data centers that are, that are just sort of like, every place is just lousy with these things right now. It's just been the objective, I guess, of a major objective of the Trump administrations and the Democrats before, to build up this data center capacity, because, again, instead of creating actual productive parts of our society, building, construction, production in this country, I should say, everything has been outsourced, with some exceptions, and the only things that can be used to kind of as sort of keep the economy afloat is just build these BS data centers, and it's not even like they don't have infrastructure projects that could be done in the United States. It's not even that you couldn't have production in the United States, but it just costs too much, according to a lot of these these capitalists. And this is essentially something that is worth doing because the upside for them is so high. So let's just take a look at this article and we can talk about it. Despite being the epitome of modern technology, artificial intelligence run mainly on antiquated fossil fuels. As tech giants race to build data centers, the energy required to sustain this AI boom locks the United States into a dangerous dependence on natural gas, one with dire consequences for the climate. Most AI are large language models, LLMs, software tools that are able to analyze linguistic patterns in billions of text sources and from context predict the next word. The most capable LLMs are those that generate text, such as ChatGPT, Claude, and Gemini. Those are the United States ones. And I also did want to point out, and maybe this was exaggerated, but it was still more efficient. But there was Chinese AI that was less resource intensive, I guess you could say, than in their large language models than the United States. Um, not falling into the Chinese AI is better or whatever, but apparently it is. AI consumes energy, most of it as electricity, in two major ways: training and inference. During training, billions of parameters which determine the weight of the various probabilities in word prediction are adjusted in an LLM using vast amounts of data. The high performance computing chips used for training require immense power. For OpenAI's ChatGPT 4, the initial training used the equivalent of San Francisco's total energy consumption over 3 days. Good God. To keep the hardware, electricity, cooling, and maintenance running. So you just need an immense amount of activity, of electricity to power this. Again, what we're getting from this is some of the worst art, some of the least useful management practices. It's the worst writing. All this stuff is just terrible. And it's just this incredible amount of resources going into this BS. Continuing from the article. Yet about 80 to 90% of the total energy consumption comes from inference, which is when users interact with the AI. AI models rely on graphics or tensor processing units for fast parallel processing, meaning many computations occur simultaneously. To perform the large matrix operations essential to manipulating and transforming data, these chips consume significantly more power than the central processing units used in almost all modern electronic devices and non-AI data centers. Indeed, querying an LLM costs 10 times more energy than a standard Google search and emits 340 times more carbon dioxide. So essentially, just nuke the planet. This is the end game. This is the kind of stuff that makes me feel like super doomery because of the amount of remember when people cared about climate change? There was actually a report. Where was it? Or it was the Gates Foundation. And the Gates Foundation have just essentially decided after years and years and years, climate change is so important. Climate change is so important. We need to make sure that we're dealing with the climate change. And then, within the next, the last few months, when this climate, when this AI, I should say, boom takes place, and the climate is essentially going to be severely impacted by this, huge. I hate to call it an innovation, but huge change. this huge focus, and the product of the outcome of that huge focus, they just decided that, oh, actually, we're not going to we're not going to talk about the climate so much anymore. Yeah, instead of focusing on climate change and the causes of climate change, the focus of the Gates Foundation or Bill Gates himself is to focus on essentially making people's lives better in the wake of that. So even if you take that perspective in its most gracious, the most benefit of the doubt that you're giving, if you just decide that you take it at face value, and you're essentially saying that, hey, they're essentially saying that, hey, the climate is screwed. There's no solution that you can possibly fix this. So we need to make sure that uh, we make it so that the people who are most heavily impacted are maybe slightly less impacted. And this is also coming from, again, and I cannot get over this. I hate Bill Gates. I hate Microsoft. I hate all these things. But sorry to be, getting off topic a bit, but there was we talked about this with Mark Allen Derry. There was when it came to mRNA vaccines and the COVID vaccine, the one that was the mRNA vaccine, and I'm sure I'm going to get part of this wrong, but part of the mRNA vaccine was developed sort of in an open source way, and Bill Gates just decided to come out and said, "You need to privatize this and make it so that essentially people could make money off of it." Um, and so it really is like I have nothing but contempt for the Bill Gates and these billionaires, these capitalists that want nothing more than to control the world. Goodness gracious. The International Energy Agency estimated that by 2026, AI electricity will still account for only around 3% of global electricity demand. Additionally, AI related computer chips have grown over 100 times more energy efficient in under 2 decades. Indeed, it is not the quantity of energy that AI consumes that is the primary issue, but where it comes from. A major challenge with sourcing energy from renewables is that um, AI centers require constant power 24/7, 365 days a year. This restriction precludes most renewable energy sources like solar and wind due to fluctuating weather conditions. Even nuclear, with its advantages as a consistent environmentally friendly source, is being rejected because of a perceived clash between the decade it takes to build a nuclear power plant and the immediacy of the energy need. So what they're doing, and the article just to sort of like summarize this is that in the wake of this sort of like new energy need, and again, I'm using quotes with my fingers because it's not so much a need that it is a desire, because they're these people see dollar signs in their eyes when they say AI, they can make bazillions of dollars off of this new innovative technology. um they're essentially going to back to natural gas and oil and fossil fuels and all of the um all of the forms of generating power and electricity that and energy that have been essentially the political, like everywhere from the sort of like political center to the political left, have been trying to get away from for the last uh as long as I've been an adult, last 30 years, 40 years. And, you know, uh, AI, so essentially you just throw AI in there and you're just like, "You know what? Screw all of the environmental policy that we've been pushing for since forever." WHIVLP New Orleans 102.3 is Good Morning Comrade. Jeff here. wrapping up the year. This is lots of fun. I did also want to talk about some good news, and this is from some weeks ago, but it is a story that has been developing. And the Starbucks workers, nationwide, in their fight for a contract, have been on strike. Um, so I wanted to talk a little bit about this and some of my experience with it, some of what I hope to see with this, because again, we've been talking about some of the things that are a little bit more doomerish, a little bit darker. Here is something that's potentially, hopefully, a bit more hopeful. So this is an article from Labor Notes. Red cups raised in rebellion. Starbucks strike spreads. Several hundred more Starbucks baristas walked out on Thursday, the 22nd day of their on their growing unfair labor practices strike. It is now the longest strike the coffee giant has faced, spreading to 145 stores in more than 100 cities. Kingston, New York baristas joined the strike early Thursday, and management didn't even bother trying to open the store. Yeah, they've been shutting stores down. So the workers, joined by supporters, picketed a nearby store in Lake Katrine, piercing the crisp winter air with chants of "What's disgusting? Union busting," and "I want to eat food and pay rent at the same time." Imagine that. Yeah, while we have these like industrial super profits that are constantly happening, where the rich have gotten richer, hand over fist over and over again. The cost of living is getting worse, and real wages that people take home and their ability to spend has gone down. So I mean, this is New York City. New York City rent is insane. That's part of why Zoran Mamdani was able to run such a successful campaign, because he ran it on affordability. And now you even have the right wing saying insane things like affordability is a hoax, which I guess keep doing that, guys. Because I mean, if that's the way you wanna, if that's the way that you think you're gonna win, uh, I wish you nothing but luck. Back to the article. Starbucks Workers United, the union representing 12,000 baristas, is currently asking customers to shun all Starbucks stores for the duration of a strike. They had not previously called for a boycott. The company is big, and the 550 unionized stores account for only 5% of the company's 10,000 U.S. outlets. Starbucks is the second largest fast food company in the world. Jeez. In Lake Katrine, several would-be customers turned away at the drive-thru, and others who had prepaid mobile orders pledged not to return for the duration of the strike. After a morning out on the picket line, some workers drove to New York City to join a rally at the Empire State Building, where there is both a flagship Reserve store serving espresso martinis and their corporate offices, which is good targeting. In Manhattan, 500 people rallied with giant red cups saying "Baristas on strike" and signs comparing CEO Brian Niccol to the Grinch. Okay. 12 workers and support. The problem with comparing him to the Grinch is that at the end, the Grinch just like becomes a convert, and then I don't think CEO Brian Niccol is going to suddenly become a convert and um start saying like, actually, we need to make sure that we're paying these workers and treating them with dignity. Maybe that's just low expectations on my part, but I've never seen it happen before. 12 workers and supporters sat down to block the iconic buildings. It's not fair to the Grinch, I guess what I'm trying to say. 12 workers and supporters sat down to block the iconic building's office entrance. They had asked for a meeting with executives in the offices above, but were met with silence. The police immediately warned that they would be arrested if they didn't move. Then they arrested all 12, while a press scrum snapped photos and crowd chanted. Same, I've seen things like that before too. I mean, that's classic civil disobedience, doing what you need to do. Make sure that, put your body on the line to get the requisite attention for this. This is, that's classic stuff. The strike started with 65 stores on November 13th, then escalated with 30 more a week later, while 5 more stores in Maryland, Virginia, and Arkansas filed for union elections. Workers turned away trucks delivering to Starbucks' largest distribution center in York, Pennsylvania on November 20th. New York Mayor-elect Zohran Mamdani and Vermont Senator Bernie Sanders joined a Starbucks picket in Brooklyn on December 1st. They blasted CEO Nickel, whose pay is 6,000 times that of the average barista. He's got bills to pay, guys. He needs all that money. He's got kids, I think. Maybe he does. I don't know. Maybe he doesn't. After 4 years of organizing, we've been covering, by the way, just to kind of pat ourselves on the back, we've been covering this nationwide organizing effort on Good Morning Comrade for as long as we've been aware of it. We've had local baristas from multiple different stores across the country join us talking on the show. So you can definitely check into our library of back episodes to see a whole lot of that, to hear the voices of workers on that issue. But anyway, after 4 years of organizing, Starbucks workers are still trying to get a first contract. Negotiations progressed for 8 months, then stalled last year. The company has racked up a record number of labor law violations since 2021 Classic, with an additional 125 charges filed by the union since January. Baristas said the main issues are pay and scheduling. The average store worker makes $15.25 an hour and works 19 hours a week, said Rami Saeed, who works at the 325 Lafayette store in Brooklyn. That is not a livable wage, Saeed said, especially not with 19 hours a week. That's part-time. What is that? 15, 25, 50, so let's just say 15 times, even rounding up to 20, what, $600 before taxes? That's not very good. In bargaining last year, the union proposed a minimum pay of $20 an hour with 5% raises each year, while the company proposed no immediate increase and 1.5% raises in future years. That's nothing. That's not even inflation. We've been consistently clear on what we need, said Ray Show, a barista at the 2 Broadway store. We're talking downtown. At the New York City rally, we need more take-home pay. We need better hours. Bring us new proposals that actually address these issues so we can finalize a contract. Saeed said that the raise they're asking for would cost, quote, less than they spent to send all store managers to Las Vegas to have this huge retreat in June. It shows how little they care about us that they are not willing to negotiate over that amount. The managerial shindig cost $80 million. At a practice pick in October, baristas chanted understaffing, lousy pay. This is how your coffee's made. Nima, a barista at the 155 Water Street store in downtown Manhattan, said she regularly stays until 2 a.m. to finish closing the store. She said that on the previous Sunday, there had only been 2 workers on the floor between 5 a.m. and noon, short staffing, which made it difficult for us to keep up with customer demand and take our legally mandated breaks. That's also another classic thing. They understaff. When we talked to Billy, a Starbucks worker in New Orleans a couple of years ago on this program, they said that they had gotten fired from Starbucks wrongly from a union store. They had gotten fired because they were short-staffed in a very similar way and it was not safe for them to run the store. And so they closed it and they got fired, if I recall correctly. Scheduling practices are so grueling that Starbucks has been breaking New York City law. On Monday, the company agreed to shell out $38.9 million for violating the city's Fair Work Week statute. Management arbitrarily cut workers' hours and voluntarily kept them in part-time work and failed to provide predictable schedules, according to the city's Department of Consumer and Worker Protection. So this is specifically New York. Workers report that company keeps many of them below 20 hours a week, the threshold where it starts providing benefits. So you get benefits at 20 hours. We'll start paying for your health care or, 401k or whatever it is. If you get to 20 hours, too bad you only work 19. And they deny requests for more hours, preferring to hire more hours-starved workers. That's been illegal in New York City since 2017 when retail workers won the Fairness Workweek law after enduring years of scheduling that created chaos for workers trying to go to school or raise a family or even go on dates. And that's just obviously this is everywhere, but in New York City, they have these laws that obviously they're being skirted by Starbucks, but in many other places, those laws don't even exist. Many retail outlets had introduced software that predicted store traffic. Oh my God, this freaking BS. I hate this. They had software that predicted store traffic based on weather and other factors. They'll forced enforce workers to conform to just-in-time schedules. So essentially, what they do is they give you, 19 hours a week or whatever, and then they're like, "Hey, we need you to come in on this day because we're busy." Calling people in for surprise shifts, short shifts, or dismissing them early. So they're essentially just cutting people early, or they're making them stay late. Under the law, workers are entitled to know their schedules 2 weeks in advance, and managers have to offer current workers more hours than hiring the new people that they're bringing on. The law has provided some relief, and the Starbucks settlement is the largest to date. As many as 15,000 workers from 300 stores will get paid $50 for each month they worked under illegal conditions. That's nothing. $50 for a month. Yikes. Between 2021 and 2024. Obviously, it's not enough that's going to these workers, but I guess it is a financial penalty that is placed on Starbucks, so that's a good thing, but it's definitely not enough. I wanted to actually talk about something that's positive before we get out of here. Something potentially to look forward to. I mentioned earlier, and again, you listen to WHIVLP New World, one of the people that just give me a comrade. Again, this is something to be wary of, something to be excited about, I would say, but also something to be, make sure it is the responsibility, especially if you're listening to me and you hear my voice and you're in New York City, but also just sort of everywhere, because this is potentially a pilot program for, a lot of these quote unquote democratic socialist policies that'll be implemented, hopefully be implemented under Zoran. And there's going to have to be a certain amount of pressure put on state level politicians and local politicians to, one, actually implement them in such a way that they're actually getting a fair, chance to be put forward, and then two, make sure that Zoran's going to even put his back into it, which he seems to have been trying to do, or at least show that he will do. But you know how politicians are. And one of the big challenges with that, at least on the American political left, is to keep your eye on the ball, to maintain focus on this stuff, because a lot of times what you'll see is there's something either more exciting or absolutely horrific that is happening. Genocide in Gaza, for example, which absolutely requires attention and response. But then things like this, things that are local, things that are here at home, kind of get left to the wayside, or if somebody like a Zoran says something that isn't exactly in line with some of those other things, that does not necessarily invalidate that person does deserve like criticism, obviously, but that doesn't necessarily invalidate the rest of their program. I say that to bring up, and this is a really good article written by Liza Featherstone and Jacobin, a little bit about the program that Zohran Mamdani is pushing forward. Zohran Mamdani wants you to do more than survive, by Liza Featherstone. Our comrade won because he told the New Yorkers they deserved it all: love, leisure, pleasure, and sport. Oh, no. Just to sort of like read the preface to it, because this is actually paywalled. Preparing to go on stage in the 2022 Climate Week panel at Cooper Union, Zohran Mamdani sat in the green room examining the tote bag giving to speakers, compelling bits of God. That's annoying. I hate you, Jacobin. What the flip? Hold on. All right, we're back. Let's talk something about let's talk about something a little bit different. Because Jacobin, I guess I let my Jacobin subscription lapse a while ago. It's been a while since I've actually gotten anything from them. So I guess that didn't happen. But that's okay. Let's so no, I don't want to talk about this. All right, I got one more segment to fill, and I don't know what to do with it. I don't want to read about a general strike. All right, let me close this. All right, cool. All right, all right. All right, here is something I did want to talk about. And I think this is like it's an interview that former guest Dan Denver. Well, I don't know if he was ever on the show, but he did an interview with Eric Blanc, Waleed Shahid, and Leah Greenberg about this sort of resistance, quote unquote, the sort of like pushback against Donald Trump, not the establishment of this establishment Democrats because they're just as awful as they've always been, but sort of a lot of the people that would otherwise and in previous situations or in previous years be sort of like anti, Bernie Sanders, anti someone like Zoran Mamdani. They've sort of kind of come along. They've lost faith essentially in the Democratic Party project. And I just wanted to sort of like kind of dig into that. This is basically pulled from an episode of The Dig, which is a great podcast if you haven't listened to it. Um, but let's take a look at this. All right. A big part, this is Dan Denver talking. He's the host of The Dig. A big part of what the socialist left have been trying to do is make the case to the liberal Democratic base that the only way to address the root causes of MAGA, and we've been saying this on this program for as long as this program has been around. The only way to address the root causes of MAGA and Trump is by confronting neoliberalism and forever wars and by overthrowing the Democratic establishment. And what seems really significant right now is that these left populist democratic socialist politics, the kind that we see in Zoran Mamdani's coalition as well as in with Bernie's fighting oligarchy tour, are breaking through in a really powerful way. How did the liberal base, which had placed their faith in the Democratic establishment, protect them from Trump, become so radicalized over the past 12 months? Let me just jump in, and I will read what some of these folks had to say as well. But like, how did the liberal base come to terms with this? Not just like normal working people, because normal working people were always with the Bernie program to at least a certain extent. We're talking about like when, Charles Schumer, the Democratic leader or whatever, says that they want the moms in the suburbs, the Panera Bread districts, to vote Democrat. They're essentially, those Panera Bread districts have turned on the Democrats. And the reason that I think that this has happened is because they've lost faith in the will or ability of the Democratic Party to even fight against this kind of stuff. So that's sort of like my take. Let's see what Leah Greenberg has to say. Leah says, I don't think you can separate the reaction that the liberal base has had in this moment from the broader societal dynamics that we have been seeing unfold. In Trump 1.0, there was at least a pretty solid pretense by corporate actors, by a lot of different institutions across society, that they were attempting to hold some set of things around the norms of liberal democracy, protect some set of vulnerable populations, and so on. We can all be really clear that it was not out of the goodness of their hearts, but it did create a pretty significant contrast. And what we've seen this time around is just the total elite institutional collapse in the face of Trumpism, starting basically immediately after he was elected. So I think for folks who believe that the Democratic leadership was telling them that it was an oncoming fascism, that it was going to be direct personal threat to them and their communities and their neighbors, to watch this combination of Democratic leadership fecklessness going quiet to the extent that they were having really internal circular arguments about blaming the groups instead of any kind of meaningful accounting about what had happened. I mean, Democrats, literally, this happened just last week as of recording. They had this big report that they spent, millions of dollars on to essentially figure out what happened in 2024 and why the perfect campaign of Kamala Harris didn't succeed. And right before they were supposed to release it, the Ken Martin, the Democratic Party, I guess the DNC chair, I think is his role, just decided to scrap it. We're not going to release that, probably because there was some stuff in there that he did not want to get out. Hopefully it leaks, and hopefully we get to see it, because it sounds like the reason that they wouldn't want that would be because there's truth in there. Anyway, so yeah, what I said is essentially the leaders of the Democratic Party essentially have, Leah uses the word fecklessness. I mean, feckless would be giving them credit because that essentially means that they're trying to fight back. And it more looks like they're trying to look like they're fighting without actually doing it. Let's look at Waleed. If you look at universities, law firms, and the federal government, media, and employees of organizations affected by big tech consolidation, there is a tangible difference between 2017 and 2025 in terms of the kinds of upper middle class or middle class white collar workers that are probably ideologically or effectively liberal, but they are being squeezed by this administration, being attacked by this administration, not just in terms of rhetoric, but also in terms of policy. J.D. Vance, Donald Trump, and Elon Musk really hate this liberal class. They have fan fiction about replacing the liberal class with robots and artificial intelligence. And I just think that there's a way in which that class is being squeezed, and the party and the elected representatives who are supposed to represent that class are not really having a fight in them to represent that in a big way. So that's another piece. Yeah, a part of the middle professional class, I guess you could say, the tech class, that would otherwise be, fine to just go along with the Democrats' BS no matter what. They're under attack, and they don't see the Democrats doing crap about it. That makes sense. Let's get to Eric Blanc's response to this. He says, I agree with Leah that the main thing is not only that Trump is way worse this time, but institutions are fighting way less. That contradiction is a deeply radicalizing dynamic. So basically, he's saying both. It does, I think, predate the election, though. For instance, the inability of the Democratic Party establishment to push out Joe Biden and the whole age debacle, which we've sort of forgotten all about. really did expose a lot of the liberal base that, contrary to the rhetoric, the motivations of the people on top seem to be much more about ego and career than about fighting fascism. That really was a very eye-opening experience. Then there's a general dynamic where, because the authoritarian drive of this new administration is so deep, liberals for positive and maybe limited reasons really feel the attack on democracy as core to their politics in a way that maybe other segments of the population don't do to the same extent. There's a radicalizing response to events in a way that, if you don't actually think that the system was working well, as many leftist or maybe like non-college educated workers do, maybe even attacks on democracy aren't at the forefront of your mind. Nobody gives a crap about attacks on democracy because the Democrats are not exactly defending democracy anyway. And what is democracy giving, quote unquote democracy, the democracy that the Democrats are selling, giving us, but more super profits for the wealthy, more wars abroad, and less for working people. It's basically imperial death and destruction and super profits for the wealthy, nothing for nothing for you, nothing for anybody. And I'm not even saying that if those actually, that's kind of the weird part about this, because the one way to maintain stability within this structure, if you wanted to maintain the super profits, and if you wanted to maintain the imperialism abroad, like, then you would essentially make sure that the bread and circuses were flowing, and as of right now, you got circuses, but you got you got no bread. um so anyway, um but if you really do believe, and think that liberals are right to believe in the importance of defending liberal democracy, then it just seems like an all hands on deck moment to do more than any other part of the population. Yeah, Eric is a constant defender of the liberal democracy. It's well, he thinks that liberals are right to believe in that. He's more of a social democrat, but regardless, um, we're in this sort of situation where the liberal Democrats can't even maintain their own system because they are too weak to even try to maintain it. And I guess what we are seeing again is more of, just to sort of summarize, because we do need to get out of here. We're seeing that, and perhaps too late, the Bernie approach, which it would have been much better if this had been taken up in 2016 or 2020, but that approach is at least being not accepted wholesale, but it's being at least considered much more seriously than it had been in the past. Because, I mean, if you recall, specifically 2016, um, the what I mean, there was an immediate deflection because these liberal figures had a lot more, I guess you could say, influence. They were able to essentially say, well, everything is fine enough, and the reason that Bernie is coming up here is because he's trying to take like Hillary's turn or whatever. And these sexist dude bros want to deny a girl boss their position, and in those, in light of the fact that most people's situation over the past 8-10 years has gotten significantly worse, that nobody cares about that. Nobody cares about the um the democracy piece as much, because if the Democrats are the defenders of democracy, then they are not able to defend. Well, one, they're not even able to defend that democracy at all, and then two, they won't, like, what has this democracy even gotten working people? Again, it's the thing I was just saying about the industrial super profits for the already wealthy, and war, death, destruction, imperialism abroad. So let's wrap up there. As far as like predictions for 2026. I don't really want to super like jump into that many of them. I just have some, I guess, some final parting words for 2025. A miserable year to be sure. We didn't even get to talk about Charlie Kirk, which again, when you compare we talked about this I think last week, but when you compare the murder of Charlie Kirk by someone who's not even a left winger, and the murder of Rob Reiner, who was a very influential producer and actor, very beloved. If you talk crap about Charlie Kirk in light of his death, you get fired. But if you talk, the president of the United States will talk crap about Rob Reiner because he wasn't with his political program or whatever, didn't like him, and that's just totally fine. Yeah. Looking forward, we're going to see a lot more of the same. We're going to see the data center situation get even worse. And here's what I fear, and I want to be hopeful. But what I fear will happen specifically on one of two things. There's two things that make me a little bit fearful about Zohran Mamdani in New York City. One is that he's not able to get his policies implemented. He's not able to essentially create the case study for social democratic, I guess you'd call them, reforms even in the city of New York, and will be set back again for another generation, which would be horrible. The second thing would be like leftist socialist people who support Zohran getting out over their skis and trying to essentially grasp as much power as possible in this moment when you really do need to lock in. You need to focus, and you need to actually get this case study to be as successful as possible. And while other pieces of it can happen at the same time, you do need to walk and chew gum. If there are, Congress or whatever seats that can be taken up by, good candidates in opportune situations, fine. But I do think it's important that the priority, especially if you live in New York City, and I don't live in New York City, the priority has to be to get this these policies implemented, and get them to be successful. That way you can actually say that, hey, the sewer socialism, which has worked several times in this country's history, can still work in 2025. That's really going to be it for me. This has been your final Good Morning Comrade of 2025. Thank you to everyone who has been listening to us. This will be 7 years in May. So this will be our 7th year of being in operation. This could not be done without the listeners. You can find out ways to listen to the show. All of our back episodes are either on our website, on our YouTube, all those interviews that I talked about, and we've interviewed hundreds of people over those years, those 7 years coming up on. But yeah, thank you so much. Hope you had a great Christmas. Have a happy New Year, and we will see you in 2026. You are listening to Good Morning Comrade. This is WHIVLP New Orleans, 102.3. We love you. Bye-bye.